Hello everybody. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to factor quadratics when a is not equal to 1 using the slide and divide method. So if you look at the first example that we have here, our leading coefficient a is not equal to 1, it's equal to 2. So what we need to do to use the slide and divide method to factor this is slide our 2, our leading coefficient, over underneath this constant at the end. So we slide our 2 over. And now, since we slid this 2 over here, we don't have to write it in front of our n squared anymore. So what we're going to have is n squared plus 5n. And now we multiply these two numbers together. So at the very end, we're going to have a 2 times 2 is 4. Now, we factor this, the n squared plus 5n plus 4, the same way we factor quadratics when a is equal to 1. So what we need to do is we need to find two numbers that will multiply to give us 4, since c is equal to 4. And we need to find two numbers that will add to give us 5, since b is equal to 5. So I like to make a table just like this. And what we need to do is we need to start thinking about numbers that will multiply to give us 4. Well, the first two numbers that I think of is 1 and 4. I also think of 2 and 2. These two pairs of numbers will multiply to give us 4, but we need to think about which pair of them will add to give us 5. Well, 1 plus 4 does add to give us 5. So these are the two numbers that we need to use. We need to use 1 and 4. So we're going to make our two binomials. Now, since our two numbers are 1 and 4, we're going to have n plus 1, and we're going to have n plus 4, using our two numbers that we found. Now, this is called the slide and divide method. We already slid in our first step, and we slid the 2 over. Now we have to divide. So since we slid this 2 over and multiplied by it in the beginning, now we have to divide both of our numbers by this 2. So, now that we've done that, we need to look at both of these fractions, so like the 1/2 and the 4/2. If your fraction will simplify, you go ahead and simplify it. If your fraction does not simplify and you're left with a denominator, like in this 1/2, you take your denominator and you move it up in front of your variable. So, since the 1/2 won't simplify, we're going to bring our 2 up in front of our n, and we're going to have 2n plus 1. Now, the 4/2 does simplify, so you can go ahead and write n plus 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay? So the factored version of 2n squared plus 5n plus 2 is 2n plus 1 times n plus 2. Those are our two factors. Let's look at another example. Okay? In our second example, we have 3n squared minus 8n plus 4. Let's use our slide and divide method. We slide the 3 over underneath the 4. And now we're going to have n squared minus 8n. 4 times 3 is 12, so we're going to have a plus 12. And now c is equal to 12, b is equal to negative 8. So let's make our table here. We need to multiply to get 12. We need to add to get negative 8. And let's think about what numbers will multiply to give us 12. I want you to notice that we need to multiply to get a positive number and add to get a negative number. The only two kinds of numbers that will multiply to give us a positive and add to give us a negative are two negatives. So we need two negative numbers here. That's the only way we can multiply to get a positive and add to get a negative. Well, what about negative 1 times negative 12? Those two numbers do multiply to give me positive 12. But they don't add to give us negative 8. They actually add to give us negative 13. Okay? So we're not going to use these two numbers. Negative 1 and negative 12 don't work. What about, let's try -2 and -6. Do those two numbers multiply to give me positive 12? Yeah, they do. Do they add to give me -8? So -2 plus -6 do add to give me -8. So those are the two numbers that we need. So now we'll make our two sets of binomials here. We'll have n minus 2 and we'll have n minus 6. Those are the two numbers that we came up with. Now what we need to do is we need to divide by this number that we multiplied by in the beginning. Okay, so 3. We're going to divide this 2 by 3. We're going to divide this 6 by 3. And now, simplify your fraction if you can. If it will not simplify, you'll bring your denominator up in front of your variable. So we're going to have 3n minus 2 times, now 6 divided by 3 is going to give me 2. So I'm going to get 3n minus 2 times n minus 2. Okay, this is our factored version of 3n squared minus 8n plus 4. Okay, this is how this factors. Let's look at a third example here. We've got 2n squared plus 3n minus 9. Well, let's use our slide and divide. Let's slide our 2 over underneath our 9, and we're going to have n squared plus 3n minus negative 9 times 2 is negative 18, so we're going to have a minus 18 at the end. And now, since c is negative 18, b is 3, we need two numbers that will multiply to give us negative 18, and those same two numbers need to add to give us 3. So let's start thinking about numbers that will multiply to give me negative 18. Well, if I'm going to multiply to get a negative number, I know I need opposite signs. So let's try negative 1 times positive 18. Okay, that'll multiply to give me negative 18. These two numbers add to give me 17, though. That's not what I want, so let's keep looking. What if we had positive 1 and negative 18? Let's try these two numbers. Well, those two numbers add to give me negative 17. That's also not what we want, so let's keep looking. What about negative 2 and 9? Negative 2 and 9. Those two numbers add to give me 7. That is not what we want. What about positive 2 and negative 9? Those two numbers add to give me negative 7. Okay, still not what I want, so let's keep looking. Let's try the two numbers. Let's try negative 3 and 6. All right, those two numbers do multiply to give me negative 18, and they also add to give me 3. Positive 3. That's what we want. We're going to use the two numbers negative 3 and 6. So we're going to make our two binomials n minus 3 times n plus 6. And now remember, we have to do the divide part of our slide and divide. So we're going to divide our negative 3 by 2. We're going to divide our 6 by 2. And now simplify your fractions if you can. If you cannot, bring your denominator up in front of your variable. So we're going to have 2n minus 3 times n plus 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we're going to have 2n minus 3 times n plus 3. That's our factored version of 2n squared plus 3n minus 9. All right, let's look at one more example here. Let's look at 3p squared minus 2p plus 5. Okay, slide and divide. Let's slide our 3 over underneath our negative 5. So we're going to have p squared minus 2p. Negative 5 times positive 3 is negative 15. All right, c is negative 15. B is negative 2. Let's find two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 15 and add to give me negative 2. Well, let's start looking. We know that we need to have opposite signs like a positive and a negative because that is the only way that we can multiply to get a negative number. So let's try positive 1 and negative 15. Positive 1 and negative 15. We'll try these first. That gives me negative 14. That's not what we want. It doesn't add to give us negative 2. Let's keep looking. Well, what if we try, let's see. What if we try negative 1 and positive 15? These two numbers add to give me positive 14. That's not what we want, so let's keep looking. What about the two numbers 3 and negative 5? Well, those two numbers do multiply to give me negative 15. They add to give me, though, negative 2. That's exactly what we want. They add to give me negative 2. So let's go ahead and make our binomials. We get p. Our two numbers are 3 and negative 5, so we'll have p plus 3 times p minus 5. Okay. Now, we need to divide both of our numbers by our 3 here. So simplify your fraction if you can. So we get p, 3 divided by 3 is 1, p plus 1. Over here, 5/3 will not simplify, so we'll bring our 3 up in front of our p, and we're going to have 3p minus 5. So our factored version of 3p squared minus 2p minus 5 is going to end up being p plus 1 times 3p minus 5. All right, guys, I hope this video helped, and I hope you have a wonderful day.